Hey everybody, Darren here, and today I'm going to be talking about the currently developing situation with Victoria 3, Paradox Studios' next grand strategy game, which doesn't yet even have a release date announced, nor does it have any official gameplay footage, or even a gameplay trailer out yet. So, as far as everyone's concerned, this is still in the oven and still cooking away, and they're releasing developer diaries as usual, and people are kind of going over all the different systems and mechanics available in the game. But what's interesting is that this game has just had a massive leak, and there's a kind of a conversation around that leak that's been developing between the game directors at Paradox Studios and a notable writer for IGN, PC Games, and various other game websites, and notable strategy game commentator Liana Hafer. So we'll get to that in just a moment, but just to catch people up on the leak, as far as I understand, a few days ago some footage started trickling out from some sort of closed beta, a private beta build, very blurry, very, very low frame rate, and like I said, just very low quality, very blurry, and there wasn't really too much you could kind of piece together, but the quality sort of improved as the days went on, and then massively the actual game leaked. So, like I said, there's no release date, there's no official game footage, and not only has now some footage come out about the game, but the game itself has leaked, and you can play this early work-in-progress beta. Now, if that's not bad enough, apparently Paradox are trying to shut down and hit people with strikes and copyright for showcasing various amounts of footage, so I can't really show any footage here today, not that it really matters too much. You can go find it if you need to. You can play the game probably if you need to. But what I wanted to talk about was this developing conversation around the game. So this is all kind of taking place on Twitter. It kind of came to my attention during a stream earlier today, and I've had some more time to think about it, so I thought I would do a little video on it. And I'm also curious to see what other people think. That's kind of why I wanted to do this video. It's, like I said, going to be kind of conversational. I'm very curious to see what everyone thinks in the comments, because it's a very interesting topic. I talked to a few of the developers just since this has happened to see kind of what their takes, and people all have different sort of perspectives on it. So Liana Hafer, as I said, strategy, RPG, horror, narrative games freelancer for IGN, PC Gamer, and others. I know them from having reviewed games, I think, like Stellaris and Imperator Rome and Crusader Kings 3. Games like that. They often cover Paradox games as a freelancer for these various websites, but they also have their own podcast, and, you know, they make appearances here and there throughout the strategy ecosystem, as it were. And they say, the Victoria 3 leak is a bummer for sure, but as far as anyone can tell, it was leaked by an unpaid beta tester. And I don't believe a company as big as Paradox should have unpaid beta testers for a commercial product. So maybe this is a learning moment. They then went on to reply to themselves and add a second tweet and said, I know it's industry standard. I know there are people lining up to do unpaid labor. Neither of those things makes it cool. Unfortunately, I think they are more likely to improve their DRM than provide a financial incentive not to leak stuff, but I hope they prove me wrong. So that's quite an interesting thing, just straight up. I think so anyway. I didn't know about that. Unpaid beta testers that are purportedly leaking the game. This is how it's kind of gotten out. Now, I presume, though I actually don't know, that Paradox have probably done this kind of thing before. I used to work for Creative Assembly. They have private beta groups. They do very similar things. As far as I know, they're not paid. This is industry standard, as they kind of go on to explain. But it does raise a very interesting kind of question. Should these people be paid? They're providing feedback for a game early. Surely that's valuable for some reason. Otherwise, the company wouldn't even do the beta in the first place. You presume they put together these builds, do the betas, try to get some feedback, and also get some just generalized QA, see if it's working on a range of different hardware that's out in the wild. How big these groups are, I don't know. The groups that I've heard about are about between 30 and 50 to 100 people, but it could be more intimate than that, or it could be larger than that. Especially for a leak on this size, I would estimate maybe around 50 people, but I don't know. We might get corrected on that. So the interesting thing then is that the various game directors, or a couple of them from Paradox Studios, have replied to Liana Hafer. So Dan Lind, who Paradox fans will know as the former game director of Hearts of Iron, he's just moved on to cool secret stuff at the studio. So he's obviously, presumably working on his own game now, another game, Hearts of Iron 5 maybe, or just something else entirely. He replied, and he said, people join beta tests because it's fun, and they can be a part of the creative process of making it. People contribute how and what they like. The deal is they get early access and get to make an impact to stuff they like, and we get feedback. I consider a lot of past betas friends. honestly, I think it sounds like you haven't been in any of our beta tests, or you wouldn't think this way. Now, I don't really know exactly what he means by I consider a lot of past betas friends. If this guy, Dan, I've actually met him, he probably doesn't remember me, but literally considers his betas his friends. I'm guessing he means he considers a lot of people who test the betas friends. I would maybe argue that if you're giving people things, that's not really a friend. Would they be your friend if you didn't give them the game early? Probably not. They're just fans of your game. Most likely. Anyway, it's quite an interesting thing. I want people to really remember what he said here. I'll refer back to it a couple of times, but remember he said people contribute how and what they like. The deal is they get early access and get to make an impact to stuff they like, and we get feedback. Now, in his replies, Arheo, the previous game director of Imperator Rome, and now I believe game director of Hearts of Iron, he's taken over the post-launch content for Hearts of Iron 4 since I think the previous DLC. So, a few years into that game's development, he's kind of taken over the reins from Dan Lind. He says, to add, the major difference between this and paid work is expectation. We don't expect anything from betas. Many of them don't do much or anything. They're super fans. Let me just rephrase that. They are super fans who get to play and feedback if they feel like it. Something they do after the game was released anyway. So this one really is the one that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. For a few different reasons. And it's why, after having thought about it, I really do I err on the side of Liana Hafer and their point. That I do think you should probably pay, at least in some fashion, the people beta testing your game, because this is valuable feedback, to use their own words against them. Well, first of all, they're sort of talking at odds with each other. Arheo is saying, it's expectation. We don't expect anything from betas. Many of them don't do much or anything. They're super fans who get to play and give, I'm sure he meant give, feedback if they feel like it, and something they do after the game is released anyway. But then we have Dan Lind, who said before, the deal is they get early access, and they get to make an impact to stuff they like, and we get feedback. Now, as I said earlier, I presume the reason you would do this beta at all is to get the feedback. I think it's a little disingenuous to then say, we don't expect any feedback. I don't think you would do the beta if that wasn't the case. It's there for a reason, because you know people are going to do it. Now, whether they're super fans or not, I don't really see what that makes a difference, whether or not that feedback is valuable to you as a company. The reason that these betas take place is so they can get feedback and ideally have a smoother launch, have a better game for both the fans and for the company designers itself, right? The designers get actually a bigger pat on the back than anyone. If the game comes out nicely, they get a bigger bonus, more likely to get a promotion, stick around on the game, or get their own game in the future, as we've seen with Martin Anward and Dan Lind and these various Paradox game directors. Nobody from the beta groups, well, maybe I shouldn't say nobody, who knows who's been hired from what, but I would presume they don't really get as much of the attention or the credit that perhaps some of these designers do for implementing said feedback that they probably get from this small community. Like I said, I worked at a company that had a small beta group as well. And they were both doing sort of like external QA work in a way, where they were helping find bugs, but they were also providing suggestions on things they liked and they didn't like, and some of that was actionable, some of that would be able to be fit into the design plans that the designers had, and they said, yes, this makes sense that we can change this, or, oh, this isn't playing how we thought, we'll change this, or that's a good idea, let's try to do something like that in future. If we can't even do it now, who knows, maybe down the line we'll get to it. So you sort of have this repository of direct feedback that you can get before this game even has a release date. No one's seen it being played yet in the public, so saying that they would just give this feedback anyway, it's kind of disingenuous. I mean, that might be true. They might give that feedback after the fact, but surely for the company, it's more valuable to get the feedback before the game comes out. The game will do better. The designers will be looked at more favorably if the feedback is good, I guess, right? And you'd have to imagine certain games like Imperator Rome or Total War Warhammer 3, two games that come to mind that are recent that haven't gone down very well, especially Warhammer 3. Now, some of these things might have had feedback already. It's not to give this feedback so much importance that this is the lifeblood of the game that will either determine whether it becomes good or not, but certainly the reason you would do these things is to improve the game. So I can only assume that with the speed that Imperator Rome got patches within weeks to turn around some of the biggest negatives of the game. That came about because of feedback. I got sent that game early. They asked me what I thought of it. Now, I wasn't in any beta groups. I did sign an NDA, but that's a whole different story. I sent them an email back saying what I liked about it and what I thought people were going to have a problem with and what I had a problem with. Very lengthy email, as nice as I could word it. And I never heard back from them again because, well, it doesn't really matter. You would assume that some of my feedback, as well as I'm sure other YouTubers, and then what they were seeing behind the scenes, indicated that we need to get things ready for our first patch and action some of this negativity as quick as possible. And when the game came out, Imperator to Rome that is, it had a very rough launch. It seemed to have pretty good players when it first came out, but it tumbled down pretty quickly and became mixed. And not that long later, it became negative on Steam. So the argument would be that getting some of this feedback and actioning it early would have prevented that and maybe would have led to the greater success of the game. When Warhammer 3 came out, it's now been met with mixed reception. And I can only imagine that having this kind of feedback, having feedback like this early, could have maybe prevented that. So you could say that, hey, they're super fans that get to play and give feedback if they like, something they would do after the game is released anyway. It's a long-winded way of saying, like, clearly, it would be more important to get that feedback early. If this feedback is that valuable that it could potentially give you a heads up to a warning sign of a potentially bad launch, which is what this feedback could do. I was part of these, well, not part of this group, but I got this feedback early, and I've seen these groups before, and I've seen what they say. Not Paradox, but other games companies, other strategy companies, and they can give major red flags as to things that are broken with the game in terms of exploits, bugs that nobody saw or caught already. They are essentially doing a lightweight version of QA work for free because they're super fans and they're willing to do it. I find that I'm going off on a load of different tangents, so I'm just going to try and rein myself back in for a second. This is why I often script things. The point that I'm trying to make here is that it often seems like companies that are big are trying to get something out of their customers or their creators or whatever it might be by paying an exposure or by paying them in something that they know that they want, but not actually just paying them. You know, the use of the word superfans here from Arheo saying that they would do it anyway it just really rubs me the wrong way. I mean, I think it's really inconsiderate of your audience, and it's actually quite insulting to your beta testers by saying that many of them don't do much or anything. Many of the betas, that is. You didn't say the testers specifically, but that infers that the testers don't do much of anything or they don't change the game at all. But I would argue if you're running beta tests and taking the time out of your schedule to develop these builds and send them out there and you're not getting anything back from them, which I don't believe, by the way. I believe you're getting a lot back out of them. If you think you're not getting a lot out of them, I don't know why you're doing it. You're just wasting everyone's time. Let's be real. You're not giving this to your friends to... Well, Dan Lind might say that he's making friends through this, but I don't think that's the motivation behind it. I think the idea is that they're trying to get feedback and improve their game. But what I often see is that, like I said, companies are trying to basically hold this over them and pay people in exposure rather than just actually pay them. In the instance of Warhammer 3, a topic that I brought up earlier, is that recently I had a conversation with Legend of Total War, how he'll get a game early, and I've gotten games this way too, and other people are getting games early, and these channels in particular are focused on one game or one company, right? Think of your favorite Paradox YouTuber, the person that just plays that one game or that family of games. Your favorite Total War YouTuber, the person that just plays those one. Those people are so heavily invested. Their career is actually more invested than a lot of people's careers even at those companies. You know, a Total War game can flop and the designers will be fine. Whereas if the game completely flops and nobody plays it, you know, I'm sure Legend of Total War sees a bigger hit in his analytics than anyone else is seeing in their bonus checks or their paychecks month to month. And I actually know that for a fact. So these YouTubers are really invested in it. So the studios sort of have this thing over them where, you know, I'll give you the game. I'll, you know, paying you an exposure, giving it to you early, you're going to get your money for doing something early, but you're not allowed to give your opinion. And that's the conversation I had with Legend. And now there's all this talk about, should the Total War YouTubers try to form some sort of union? Not an actual union, not a workers' union, but a sort of a group agreement between them where they decide whether or not they're going to cover something. Now, I just don't see that working because unfortunately, if you are all invested in covering something, Arheo is right. They will do this anyway. And they will. If Immortal Empires releases for Warhammer 3, There's no way those YouTubers could all agree not to cover it if the coverage terms weren't that good. They'd cover it because the exposure, the growth, the money, the analytics, all of that, and the passion for the game is there that they'll want to talk about it. So at the end of the day, they don't actually have that any power over the company, but the companies do get a lot out of their creators, and they do get a lot out of their beta testers, from what I understand, that they should, and I think it's an interesting conversation to bring up, that they should perhaps get paid for it. And I want to know what you think. What do you think? Now, I don't want this to be some politicized thing. I don't know or care necessarily what Liana Hafer's politics are, or any of these people. I just presented the argument. Lose all your biases if you can, and if you have any, if you can. But just the question is, should someone that provides feedback many months out from a game's release be paid to do so? Like, if I was to get I'll be honest, I get surveys for games or people ask me their feedback, and I don't have the time to give it to them. People pay for that. I've been reached out to before to be consulted on various strategy games, and they pay. You know, creators who can't give an opinion for a video are usually paid. It's called a sponsorship. You know, I've done sponsorships. I'll just talk about a game. I can't give my full opinion on it because I'm sponsored. You shouldn't ever, as a creator, cover something with an NDA that says you can't give your own opinion if you're not being paid to do it. Your self-worth is so low to do that, in my opinion. Now, some people might feel like I'm getting a lot of money doing the video anyway, and that's how I'm getting paid, but the company owes you, in my opinion, and they pay other people to do it. So to get access to your audience, it just seems a bit wrong that you wouldn't do it that way. And it's the exact same to me when it comes to actual players, especially of these types of games. You've got valuable feedback, you've got valuable insight, they want it. They don't put up the betas for fun. Anyway, I could go around in circles on that for a while. I'd be very interested to hear what people think. I think this is kind of an interesting video and topic to talk about. Like I said, I don't agree with a lot that Liana Hafer says, but I totally agree with this one. And it took me a while to kind of think about it and come around to it. But the more I think about it, the more I think, yeah, she's got a good point. They should probably pay for feedback. Anyway, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know what you think. I'm really eager to read the comments, and I'll follow up on the Victoria 3 stuff if there's any more developments. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.